Hi guys, we're here today with Marc Randolph. He's the founder of Netflix. Netflix valuation today is $135 billion valuation, and I'm extremely happy to have him here. And he's going to share the story of Netflix from an idea, from a seed to IPO. Marc, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much.
So, I know it's hard because in 30, 40 minutes to tell the story of Netflix is very difficult because there's so much depth. So if you could try to carry us from how you came up with the idea and to some of the pivotal moments of the growth of this company.
Well, it's a long story. It didn't spring overnight from 0 to 50 million subscribers like that. And in many ways, that's why I wrote the book that you read, which is I wanted to tell that untold story.
Yes.
But in many ways, the story goes back, more than 20 years now, to 1990. Let's go back even further, 1996. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I've pretty much been an entrepreneur my whole life. Netflix was company number 6. But company number 5, in many ways, was kind of the formative one because it was a really geeky little startup I was doing with 2 friends of mine. It was called Integrity QA, and we ended up selling the company. And we ended up going to work for this much, much bigger company. And as luck would have it, this bigger company was run and had been founded by a guy named Reed Hastings. And it turned out also that Reed lived in Santa Cruz, where we are right now, where I live. And so Reed and I began carpooling to work. So this lucky break of this startup getting acquired, which was good enough as it was, but then all of a sudden, now I'm working for Reed, carpooling with him and getting to know him. And then came the other big forcing factor here, which is that this bigger software company, Reed's company, it was being acquired. Good. But this time we weren't so lucky. We weren't all going to get jobs with the new company. Reed and I were being made redundant, as they euphemistically put it. We were being fired. Yeah. But we were being fired in the good Silicon Valley way, where they go, you're going to have to come to work for 6 months, and we're going to pay you, and we're going to vest your stock. But because all you're really there is to answer questions, you don't really have much to do. And I go, okay, this is pretty good. I have 6 months. I'm going to start the next company. Now, Reed Hastings, he did not want to start another company. He instead decided he wanted to change the world of education. So he was going to go back to school and get a higher degree, but he wanted to keep a hand in the startup game. And so we decided that we would do it this way, that we'd come up with an idea together, that he'd be my angel investor, he'd put the money in, that I would start the company, I'd hire the people, I'd run the company, and off we'd go. But we needed that idea. Yeah. And so the way we looked for an idea was this. On these commutes that we had, that was about, maybe an hour each way, to and from Sunnyvale, where the office was. We would brainstorm ideas. And this was not like I came into this saying, oh gosh, I've been a movie guy my entire life, and I'm going to find some way to do a movie. I was a normal person. I watched movies, sure, but I was not passionate. I didn't know about French films or about directors or any of that crap. Yeah. I had very pedestrian tastes. So my criteria had nothing to do with movies. All I wanted to do was sell something on the internet. And the internet was pretty new. It was probably 5 years old. E-commerce had just started. Jeff Bezos' Amazon was only selling books, if you can imagine a time like that. But my career earlier on was a direct marketing guy and a catalog guy and a mail order guy. And so I immediately saw how powerful the internet could be for selling something. So I wanted to sell something on the internet. Yeah. And the other criteria I had is I wanted it to involve personalization, because I saw the internet as being this amazing tool for delivering a custom experience to each individual user. So that was where it started. And so some of the ideas that Reed and I tossed around were crazy ideas. Like one of them was personalized shampoo. Yeah. So we'd say, cut off a lock of your hair and mail it to us, and we'll analyze it and formulate a shampoo just for you and subscribe to it. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea. Another one was dog food, selling dog food on the internet, but this one also custom formulated for your pet. I also researched using a computer-controlled milling machine to make custom baseball bats. So there's a theme here. Personalization, the internet selling things. And then one of the equally crazy ideas was renting video by mail.
Yeah.
And that came because we looked at Amazon and went, wow, these guys are doing books. What other huge categories are there that we could bring onto the internet? And we said, maybe we could just sell movies. And went, nah, commodity. But video rental is interesting. It's huge. It's like an $8 billion category. But when I researched it, back then, this is in 1997, video rental, I'm not even sure if you're old enough to remember this, but they came on video cassettes.
The tapes.
Yeah, you probably
Tapes.
watched Lion King 100 times on a tape. And the research that I did, which was, finding out about shipping and stuff, went, this is not going to work. And also for reasons that are too complicated to go into here, they were expensive. They're about $100 a piece. And I said, this is not going to work. And we abandoned the idea. So if there was a single inciting event, which they say in screenwriter talk, it was one carpool. And this was about a month or two after we'd thought of and rejected the video rental by mail on cassette, when we heard about this thing called the DVD.
Yeah.
And it was brand new. It was in test market. And it was, as we read, going to be a thin disc about the size of a music CD. And that gave us this idea that maybe this could be the key to unlocking an idea we'd already thought of and rejected. That we could mail DVDs to people in the US mail. And so rather than thinking about it, rather than going to work and writing a business plan, or rather than going home and working on a pitch deck or something stupid like that, we go, let's just figure out right now whether the basic tenet of this idea is viable. And so we turned the car around mid-commute and drove back down to Santa Cruz and went and looked for a DVD. But of course, there's no DVDs available. It's in test market in only a few cities. So we decided to settle on buying a used music CD. From a record store right down the street down there in Santa Cruz. And then we went 2 doors down and bought a little envelope, like a little pink gift envelope you'd put a greeting card in, and put the CD in the envelope, and then walked to the Santa Cruz post office and bought a first-class stamp and dropped it in the slot, and then went to work. And the next day, when Reed stopped to pick me up to ride to work, all he had to do was hold up this little envelope with an unbroken CD in it that had gotten to his house in less than 24 hours for the price of a stamp. And that's kind of the moment we said, wow, this idea might work. And Reed wrote a check for $1.9 million. I went out fundraising for an additional $100,000 to try and get other people to buy in, to at least give us some sense whether the idea was a valid one or not. And we raised $2 million in all. I rented a small office, an old bank building up in Scotts Valley, just north of here. Dirty green carpeting. It had a vault in the corner. I hired about a dozen people, and then we spent 6 months building this simple e-commerce website. I mean, the type of website that you or anybody could probably build in about 6 hours. But back then, if you wanted a website, you had to write the code yourself. Everything was from scratch. So 6 months later, I was April 14th, 1998. We turned the switch and boom, we're live.
82% of small businesses fail because of cash flow problems. Are you in the dark about your company's expenses? Now you can have complete clarity about your business with a Divvy card. Divvy card will allow you to set your budget, spending limits, and see every transaction in real time. You can easily manage employee expenses, pay bills, and even book travel. You can also create virtual cards and set spending limits. This way you can prevent vendors from overcharging you. If you use Divvy, you don't need expense reports, employee reimbursements, and receipt tracking. Divvy also allows you seamless transfer of all transactions into your accounting software, so now you can close your books faster. This is how you control your company's spending and have complete clarity into what's happening in your financial part of the business. For a limited time, Divvy's offering $50 to you. They're going to give you $50 to demo the platform to you so they can show you how this product is going to help your business be a lot more successful. Sign up for the link below and you're going to get $50 for them just to demo the product for you. All you need to do is be a financial decision maker at a company that spends at least $10,000 a month.
90,000 people bought these headphones. That's 90,000 people. That's almost the size of a small country, right? So 90,000 people bought these headphones, 2,500 5-star written reviews, and 96% of people would recommend these headphones to a friend. Now, with Drop, this company, they sent them to me to share my thoughts about these headphones with you. Number one reason they're awesome is because the price of these headphones is only $195. Now, every headphone of this quality is going to cost you $300, $400, $500. These headphones, only $195. Number two, they're very comfortable. You know how some headphones, they sit on your ear and they press on your ear and they make it sweat? Not with these. These headphones will cover your ear so you won't sweat, and that's because of this kind of the layout that they did. So they're comfortable, it'll cover your ear, and they're very lightweight. You can literally just put these things on and you won't even know you're wearing them for hours. Number three reason is they have really, really good sound. The reason they have great sound is because the company that makes them, which is called Sennheiser. Sennheiser has been making headphones, consumer-facing headphones, for over 80 years. That's all they do is make consumer-facing headphones, so the sound is really awesome. In summary, click the link, get you a pair of these really, really awesome headphones because they're affordable, only $195. They'll be comfortable, they'll have great sound, and 90,000 people already bought them.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Ideation, the way you ideated, the way you came up with this is quite different to how they're doing it now, right? The common logic that people are saying now is have a huge problem, solve it yourself. But you guys were trying to come up with an idea to build, a business to build. So what advice would you give to the founders who are specific at doing this?
Well, the funny thing is that this was a different time. I mean, like I said, when you had an idea, you couldn't test it easily.
Yeah.
So we had the idea, in the summer of 1997, and it took us a year before we could actually collide the idea with a real person. Because there was no cloud, so we couldn't just get a Squarespace instance, we couldn't just do Shopify, we couldn't get PayPal, we couldn't do Optimizely, we couldn't do all the things that now you could turn on instantaneously. So to test an idea took a year.
Yeah.
So if you were going to do that, you better be sure or be as confident as you can that your idea is a good one. And that put a huge barrier in place. I mean, you needed to raise a lot more money than you have to raise now. And you couldn't take a winger. I mean, I was 38 years old. I had 5 startups already. I mean, Reed had already had a big startup and an IPO. So we were a known quantity. And that whole thing, that was a terrible time to start businesses because it was so hard. And because it was so hard, you couldn't do it unless you had a track record and you were old. I mean, now it is a different story. So now I do recommend something different. I go, find a problem, find something that is a barrier, find something that frustrates you, and try stuff. And the time from ideation to verification was 6 to 12 months for us. Now it's 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can bang through things. It is so much a better time to be an entrepreneur. So in this case, don't do what I did.
Faster.
Faster. You collide your idea immediately.
And what you did actually applies even to businesses that are running. You're suggesting to test what you're doing really quickly.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that's why you mailed it. You wanted to know, will it ship, will it arrive, right?
That is the key ingredient for entrepreneurship, is this predisposition to action.
Yeah.
To not be the type of person who, I have this great idea. And so then they start thinking about it. And they're driving around going, oh, this is amazing. Just think what happens when I have 1 million users. How when everyone's using it, then I'm going, geez, stop dreaming. Stop thinking about what will happen when you have 1 million users. How are you going to get the first 10?
Yeah, for sure.
And then and people build these castles in their mind, and they make them more and more elaborate, and it's got turrets and gargoyles and swimming pools and tennis courts, and then of course, then they go, Mark, I have this idea. And they go, great, tell me. And they tell you this elaborate plan, and they go, so I need $10 million, and I need 100 people. And I go, you should have come to me 6 months ago when you could have done it yourself for $25 in 5 minutes.
People will decide what they think of you within 7 seconds. That means you have 7 seconds to make a first impression. And looking good is really important, believe it or not. It's really, really important for that first impression. So if you want to look good, I recommend get an Indochino suit. Indochino has really, really good suits for men. Why? One, they're made to measure. That means, all of our bodies are different. You don't want a suit that comes short or wide or something. A small difference will make a whole great looking suit look bad. So with Indochino, it's made to measure. That means the suit will fit you perfectly. Two, it's customizable. That means you can customize the suit however much or little you want, from the stitching to the width, to the buttons, to the pockets, right? To the inside engravings. You can even put your name on the inside, so you can fully customize your suit. They're also really affordable, you don't want to spend a lot of money on a suit. You want a great looking suit that fits you perfectly at a good price. And that's why this works, because it's only $359 for a premium suit. $359 with my code STARTUP. And you get free shipping. That means the suit will come to you for free for $359, fully customizable. And you can go to one of their many locations, many of their showrooms in North America to get measured. Or if you already know your exact measurements, you can just enter them online at Indochino.com. In summary, click the link now, get you a suit, get you an awesome suit, enter the code STARTUP so you can save some money for just $359. So then you raise this money.
Yes, there you go. Back to reality.
And when you raise this money, you have this $2 million. Now, was this a story about the VC who told you guys that you have to think about streaming? Is this
Yeah, the book is called That'll Never Work. Yeah. And it's called That'll Never Work because that is what everybody told me. And I heard that, my wife said, that'll never work. Yeah. And there was two basic camps of objections. The consumers that I told it to, like my wife or my friends, and their objection was video rental by mail. Why on earth would I rent on the internet, have you mail it to me, and I get it in 2 or 3 days when I can go to Blockbuster? And back then, this is another thing you may not remember, there was 9,000 Blockbuster stores. So there's immediate gratification. So that was half the people who said that'll never work. The other half were the people who were the VCs, right, or anyone that I went to for money. And they said, why on earth would I want to invest in a company which has evolved DVDs? It's a digital medium. It's just a matter of hours or weeks before everyone's downloading movies or streaming movies or digitally delivering movies. And then DVDs, it's just a flash in the pan. And in a weird way, they were right. That Reed and I knew that it was a digital medium. We knew eventually it'd be digitally delivered. Yeah. Where we differed was the timing. Yeah. I mean, they imagined it's going to happen in a few months, and we knew it would be a long time. And it was not just the bandwidth, which didn't exist. It was the fact that Hollywood was not about to put their movies into a digital form, because they had seen what happened with music. Yeah. When that got digitized, and all of a sudden, boom, it's all over the place for free. So we knew it would be a long time. So the challenge, and this is kind of a more complicated thing, was we got to build a business now. And now you cannot build a business on streaming. But if we build this business entirely on DVDs, it'll be great for a while, but eventually DVDs will go away. So you're stuck. Yeah. And so instead we got to position this delivery agnostic. This cannot be the fastest way to ship plastic, nor can it be the best way to stream. It's got to be something that will survive. And so the positioning that we came up with, it's the best way to find movies you love. Because we knew that worked now. Yeah, yeah. Find a movie you love, we'll give it to you on DVD. Yeah. But it'll also work in X years when they're streaming. Find a movie you love, we'll stream it to you. And the beauty of it is it'll work 10 years from now. Yeah. When people are projecting it holographically using their helmets or whatever.
VR, whatever.
Whatever, or beaming it into your fillings or however they do it in 20 years from now, it won't make a difference. And so the beauty is we built a company that worked then, and where every single piece of equity we built, every customer we added on, all the emotion that went behind believing in Netflix carried through once streaming did arrive. And in some ways, when you look back, I go, that's got to be probably the best decision, or one of the best decisions I ever made, was positioning it that way. Because so many companies can see there's going to be a technological shift in the future. And they don't prepare themselves for it, or they continue to double down, investing time and energy and building equity in something which is ultimately going to go away, or leave them vulnerable to being disrupted by someone else who's willing to say, I'm going to go for the future and not be beholden to the past.
But that means they have to do both, right? They have to be aware of where the future's going. Like you guys were aware streaming is the future, but you took action to seize the opportunity today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That way you're seizing it today, you're aware of it. But sometimes they go too far, right? They're building only for the future, or, right? You seized it, but you knew where you were going.
I totally agree. I mean, the analogy I used, I was quite cleverly, I'll say, a couple days ago, was it's almost like rowing a rowboat across a river or something like that. I mean, you have got to focus on your stroke and really put your back into it. But in a rowboat, you're facing this behind you. So periodically, you've got to be doing this. And going, where am I going? And making sure that you're actually going in the right direction. But if you spend your whole time doing like this, and you're flailing the oars, and that is the challenge of starting a company, is you've got to focus on the here and now, because the here and now is what's here and now.
Sure.
But if you're not cognizant of where you're going and course correcting and taking into account the currents and the weather and all the weird shit that can push you off course, you're screwed too.
That's awesome. The rowboat, I'm going to use this.
Yeah, the rowboat.
I have one more question.
Sure.
You guys did something incredible. In your book, you mentioned that I think 80% of your sales were selling the DVDs. But then you guys decided to cut this off because it wasn't the future. This goes back to this, right? Can you kind of walk us through kind of what happened with this? Because that's crazy, right?
Yeah, and it's actually a really good lesson for any entrepreneur that we kind of had to learn, which is that at the beginning, okay, so we launched this company, fantastic, rental's going to be it. And as a sideline, we may as well sell DVDs. You know, because we have to go through the effort, we want to be about finding great entertainment, and so we made all this effort to identify every single DVD there was. There was like 970 of them. And we had at least one copy of everything. And the thing that made this a viable possibility going in was the fact that no one else was carrying DVD at the beginning. Because Blockbuster, they had 9,000 stores, but each neighborhood might have 2 people in it who owned DVD players. So we knew we had a window before a Blockbuster store was willing to invest in stocking DVD. So we had DVDs, so as an afterthought, we might as well sell them. And when we started, we found out that this idea that everyone said that'll never work, they were right that it didn't work. No one wanted to rent from us. I mean, but people were buying from us, and they were buying a lot. And that by the end of the first month, I think it was, maybe the second month, the end of May, there was this great news in that we were on track to do $100,000.
Awesome.
$1 million run rate.
Awesome.
Bad news is 98% of it was selling DVDs. And that it was, I was going to the company and go, hey, we're doing great, $1 million run rate. But to myself, I was going, oh, this really sucks. Because it's just a matter of time before Amazon enters. And then Walmart's going to enter, and then Kmart, and then, I don't know, PetSmart. You know, everyone's going to start selling DVDs, and the margins are going to get driven down to zero. And then we're out of business. Now, the rental we still thought was promising. If we could figure out a way to make it work, so it had high margins, it was operationally complicated, so defensible. But the real challenge is that doing both at the same time was really hard. It was confusing because of those 970 titles, like some of them you could sell, some you could rent, some you could do both, but it was a mixed bag. And just imagine positioning yourself about rental and sales and the order process and the warehousing and the reporting. Everything was complicated. And so we said, okay, listen, if we're going to get something right, we've got to go all in and focus on everything we have on one part of this business. And that made this incredibly scary choice. Because do I focus on sales, which is paying 98% of the salaries, but is eventually and slowly but surely going to rise and then sink, or do I bet it all on rental, which if I could make it work was an $8 billion category, but was showing like zero signs of life. And obviously, you kind of know what we ultimately did, is in one day, in the fall of 1998, we pulled the plug and said, okay, starting tomorrow, no more sales, rental only. And I got to tell you that when you walk away in a single moment from 98% of your revenue, it definitely it focuses your mind. Yeah, you are all in now, and we were all in, and we had to figure out rental, and it's another interesting story that came out of that one. So that was focus.
Yeah.
That it's triage. It's what's the important thing, and it may not be the obvious one. It's having the courage to walk away from a big business to make sure you're fully invested in the future.
Yeah.
So the other one was when we all of a sudden go, we got to figure this out. And it wasn't a lack of ideas, because we all had ideas of things to test and try. We do punch cards, we'll do buy one, get one free, we'll do all kinds of crap. Rent one, get one free. But the problem is at the beginning, I was this testing perfectionist. And so every test I did was like this work of art. We'd do custom photography, and we'd all argue about the copy, and we'd send it out to a copy editor, and we'd stress test the site and test all the links. And it might take us 3 weeks or a month to get this test ready, and then roll it out, and then the test would fail. And we went, wow, that was a waste of a month. Okay, so faster,
Speed,
and we do it in 2 weeks. And then faster, do it in a week, and then pretty soon we were doing a test every day. And of course, stuff sucks. Links are broken, and we're crashing the site, and there's the wrong image, and there's typos and misspellings. But it was this incredible insight. This is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the insight was that it didn't make a difference. That if it was a bad idea, then even this month-long perfect test wasn't going to make it work.
Yes.
But if it was a good idea, even with mistakes and crashing the site, people still, they'd be rebooting the site trying to do it, or they'd be calling us or coming to the door. And then it was like this big spotlight, and here's the thing you got to fix. And it was this insight that it was not about having good ideas. It was about having this culture and this process and this system to try hundreds of bad ideas. It was that fail fast methodology back before anyone was talking about that. Yeah. When we realized that is how we're going to do it. And that's what Netflix was really, really good at. We were testing hundreds of things. And this is before you had software you could download to do testing. We had to write all of our own A/B stuff. We had to write all of our own analytics. There was data warehousing. It was not in the cloud. You did not have Tableau and Splunk and Looker and all that crap. But that ultimately, that focus on numerical analysis and determining exactly in front what's important, what are you going to test, that made a huge, huge difference.
Got it. So what's interesting is this story kind of takes me back to Andrew Carnegie once said the best way to create wealth is to put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket. That's kind of the lesson of how you guys did this, and then really rapid iteration, really rapid testing, which is all hard. It's hard to even identify these things, right?
Really hard, yeah.
And so then you raise this $2 million.
Okay, so there we go.
Where are we going? Where are we going?
All right, so we're off and running. I'll tell a quick story, but at the beginning, everyone's going, this is not going to work, and it's not working. And then all of a sudden, this is that same first summer, we get this call from Jeff Bezos and says, why don't you guys come on up to Seattle? Love to chat. And we're going, whoa. On one hand, this is fantastic. This is the idea that everyone is saying will never work. And now here's Jeff Bezos, who's like the pioneer of e-commerce, seeing something. And we knew that what he probably was looking at was acquiring us. Because he was then, as I said before, only books.
Yeah.
But it was no secret that he wanted to be the everything store.
Yeah.
And it was also clear his next categories were going to be music and video. And so we fly up there, and it was really amazing because we're going, this is awesome. We're going to see the cutting edge of e-commerce. And all of a sudden, Reed and I are walking through this sketchy, dangerous neighborhood in Seattle. Yeah. There's people up in the doorways, there's broken windows. And we turn the corner, and the Amazon headquarters is there. And it's this old warehouse, and the windows are dirty. We're going like, this?
It's a pioneer.
This is the pioneer of e-commerce? Yeah. And it was really awesome, though, because back then it was small, and Jeff Bezos, in the office you'd walk in, and besides the normal, pizza boxes and dogs and people all squunched in the corners, all the desks were made out of doors, old doors on 4 wooden legs. And I asked Jeff Bezos, what's with the doors? And he goes, I can't imitate Jeff Bezos, but he's going, no, this is our symbol that we don't spend money on things that customers don't see. And I go, God, that is just so cool. And we had this long conversation. We were sharing how both of us had bells that rang when orders came in at day one, and how we were playing around with what our mutual beta names were for the company. Because we were Kibble before we were Netflix, and they were Cadabra before they were Amazon. Anyway, and at the end of the meeting, we got his CFO goes, listen, if this is going to happen, we think, here's where it's going to be, and it would have been about $15 million. And on one hand, I'm going, this is awesome. I have about a third of the company, so $5 million for a year's work, that's pretty good. But on the other hand, Reed and I on the flight home are going, we're just getting started. We've solved what, parentheses, we thought were the hard problems. We've built a site, we've got analytics going on, we've sourced every DVD, we have deals with the DVD manufacturers to put coupons in the boxes. Why give up now? Yeah. And we walked away. And then on it went. And it took us a year and a half of one failed test after another, each one, albeit with a glimpse of promise. We learned something enough to encourage us to keep going and to raise the money. But it took us about a year and a half, and finally we had these two crazy ideas. And one of them came from being I was in our warehouse, and the warehouse had, a couple 100,000 DVDs in it by this point. And I was looking around the warehouse going, God, it is such a shame. All these movies are sitting here. Why can't we store them at the customers' houses? Could we figure out some way to have them wait there? So they can at least use them until we need to ship them someplace, peer-to-peer, whatever. We go, let's just let them keep the DVDs. Let them keep them until they're done, then they mail it back, and we'll send them a new one. Not a bad idea. Then the other thought was, why do we want to charge them every single time they return a movie to swap it? Let's just charge them a monthly subscription, which covers the cost of them keeping the DVD for a month, and they can exchange as often as they want. Unlimited rentals, no due dates, no late fees.
That's awesome. At the time, nobody had this. Now they're doing these models, right? But I mean, nobody has these models.
No one had those ideas. And it was a crazy idea. And again, it was just one more thing that we go, well, who the hell knows? Let's push it out and see what happens. And amazingly enough, that one worked. That crazy idea took off. And all of a sudden, orders were flooding in. People were telling their friends, and the trajectory was immediate. And we were up to about 100,000 subscribers, like really, really quickly. And there was bad news here as well. And the bad news is this idea was so complicated. No due dates, I keep it and then I swap it, that I dusted off something from my past. Because I was in mail order for many years. I did magazine circulation. And I knew about the first month free, which is what almost every magazine does. So I go, let's just do first month free. We'll do a soft offer where basically first month free, give us your credit card, and if we don't hear from you, we'll charge you, and off you go. Yeah. Another crazy idea to apply to this.
Started a free trial.
Yeah. And that worked too. Yeah. And because at the end of the first month, 98% of the people were letting us continue. The problem is when you do a subscription, when you do free trial, when you do SaaS, all your acquisition cost takes place up front. All the cost fulfilling that first month free comes up front. Yes. And then you have some margin, and you get your margin back a little bit over the months. So the more you acquire and the faster you acquire them, the more money you lose. The more, not the money you lose, the more cash you're out. Yeah. And this thing was taking off. And it was, again, very similar to those first days of all that money coming in on sales. On one hand, I was going, this is awesome. We got 20,000 subscribers this quarter. And the other hand, I'm going, holy crap, those are costing me $50 a piece. Where are we going to get the money? And the worst part of it was this was the fall of 2000. And spring of 2000 was the beginning of the dot-com collapse. And by the fall, the balloon had all the air out of it. And there was no way you could raise money. Whereas back in April, you could go out on Highway 17 over here and put a sign up with a flag, and the truck would pull over and then dump all the money into your driveway, and the guys come out with the wheelbarrows and you shovel the money, off you go. And then by September, you're putting the flag out and the driver is like putting his head down, driving right past you. Anyway, so we're screwed. No way to raise money. We're hemorrhaging cash being successful.
Yeah.
And so we go, okay.
What is the revenue by this time? Like, what is the monthly revenue at this kind of?
Probably coming up on $1 million, $1 million a month.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Right. But we were that month we were probably on track. That year we were going to close the year with about $5 million in revenue, but we were going to lose about $50 million getting there. So not sustainable. Not without some miracle. And so we decided to do that thing that the prudent entrepreneur does. They call it pursuing strategic alternatives, which is code for we got to sell this guy fast. And so the obvious strategic alternative back then, this is in 2000, was Blockbuster. But we were still a gnat compared to the elephant that was Blockbuster. We were, like I said, on track to do $5 million. They were going to do $6 billion. We had a couple hundred employees, and they had 60,000 employees. They had 9,000 stores. We were nothing. And so we called them for meeting, nothing. We had our VCs do the go-between, nothing. Silence. And then we go about our business, okay, I guess we're going to have to get out of this some other way. And we were at a corporate retreat. We were in Santa Barbara in the foothills in a little resort called Alisal Ranch. And it's pretty casual, and we're horseback riding and all the usual BS you do in a corporate retreat. And I had packed pretty lightly. I had T-shirts and shorts and flip-flops, and that was it. And that, of course, is when Blockbuster calls and says, "We'll see you. We have an opening tomorrow morning in Dallas." And we're going, how are we going to get from here to Dallas by tomorrow morning? And so we did that prudent thing that you do when you're $50 million in the hole. We chartered a corporate jet, and here's your Netflix trivia. So the jet was owned by a woman named Vanna White, which you may not know. Vanna White is famous for being the person who flips the letters on a Wheel of Fortune. That's Vanna White. That was her jet. Anyway, so we fly to Blockbuster, fly to Dallas, go up to their huge skyscraper, up to the 37th floor, whatever it was, in this huge conference room. And it's me and Reed Hastings and our CFO, Barry McCarthy. And I'm in shorts and a T-shirt. And Barry has on a Hawaiian shirt. So I'm jealous that he has buttons. And the Blockbuster guys come in their fancy clothes and the fancy expensive shoes and the whole thing. And it was this weird, it was this symbolic representation of how out of our league we were. And we make the pitch that we'll combine forces. And we'll find the synergies, that we will run the online part of the business, they'll run the stores, we'll do a blended model, and we'll promote it in the stores. It's a win-win for everybody. And it was going great. They were nodding their head and they were asking good questions. And then they asked the big question, which is how much should we pay for you? And we had actually prepared, we figured that was going to come up. And on the plane, we had decided, well, we're $50 million in the hole, so $50 million. And we told $50 million. And there's kind of an interesting dynamic going on here, because the CEO of Blockbuster at the time was a guy named John Antioco. And he's kind of a turnaround specialist, but he's famous for being this incredibly empathetic leader. Like, he listens and he looks you in the eye and he leans in and asks and nods his head and can connect with every employee. He's famous for this. And I could watch him during the whole meeting doing this. I'm going, God, this guy's awesome. And then once we hit him with the $50 million, all of a sudden I go, I couldn't quite, had this expression on his face and I couldn't quite read it. And what I eventually realized is that he was trying to hold in laughter at this $50 million ridiculousness.
But the revenue was $1 million a month, right? So by multiples of if it's $1 million a month, right, it's $12 million. It's only like a 4x multiple. It wasn't a crazy multiple.
Sure, but it was a .com multiple, and he was watching all of these companies. He's looking at the web van, hundreds of millions of dollars, and, Cosmo.com, all of them crashing and burning. No apparent viable economic model for .com. If you had a .com, it was the scarlet mark on you.
I understand.
And I think that's why he was going. I mean, listen, in retrospect, of course, he should have paid $500 million for Netflix.
Yeah.
But he didn't, and we ended up, we flew home. Disappointed would be the understatement. I mean, we were desperate. We didn't know where else we were going to go. And when we got the call, we go, this is obvious. This is going to be the thing that saves us.
Yeah.
And instead, we're flying back going, oh man, not only do we not have Blockbuster saving us, now we're going to have to compete with them. And it was extremely sobering.
That's incredible, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, even already describing vision, focus, lots of innovation, hacking. We call it hacking, right? Like you were hacking, trying to change things.
Yeah.
2 acquisition offers, cutting off business lines. So now you went back home. You turned down this acquisition offer from Blockbuster, which you thought would save you because you're losing $50 million. But you got massive traction. You have massive traction, right? Just your upfront cost is so large.
Right.
What's the next move?
So there was a Hail Mary. We eventually did find someone to lend us enough money to let us keep going. And it was not that long afterwards that we were, about 2001, that we go, we're not going to make it. That if you look at how, the only way we're ever going to get public is to be profitable. And the only way, we can't take 5 years to get profitable. We have to do it quickly. And we had to do this terrible layoff. And we had never imagined we would ever have to do that. But we cannot carry this many people, because if we do, we'll never make it.
Yeah.
And it was another dynamic that every startup has to deal with, because what you have to do is take people that were there at the beginning, that came in, and there were these incredible generalists, and they worked so hard, and they were believers, and they had all the right attributes for a startup. But now you're bigger, and now you have hundreds of employees, and now you have people who are experts in individual domains. And a lot of these people from the beginning are not the right people anymore. And you've got to sit someone down who was there with you from the beginning and explain that you're not coming with us. And it's an awful, awful feeling. I mean, I think, you mentioned that you had listened to the audiobook.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you could tell, but I was having like PTSD as I was reading out loud that section about doing the layoff, because it was so emotional for me of saying this. But there was a really interesting silver lining to the layoff. And it wasn't just the fact that it allowed us to keep on going, but it brought us back culturally to something that we had lost without knowing it. And
Scrappy.
What's that?
More scrappy.
Yes, but something even different. I'm gonna, if you bear with me, I'm gonna do a quick sidetrack about this, which is at the very beginning, and I alluded to it a moment ago. At the beginning, when you've only got 7 people or whatever the number is, there is no time for telling people what to do. There's 100 things that need doing, 100 things broken, and everyone is all hands on deck doing all they can. And so you do not go, okay, here's what you need to do. Do this and this. If you bump into this, go this way. And here, I'll check in with you. You go, screw it. All right, you see that mountain over there? I'll meet you there in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you better be there. And when you're there, I expect you to have X and Y and Z. Okay, got it? All right, and then I don't even see you again.
Yeah.
And I count that in 3 weeks, you'll crawl up bloody and bruised, and you'll pull open the bag, and you'll have all the stuff that I expected you to have done in 3 weeks. And I won't even know what you went through, that all the stuff you expected was different, and you had to do a long way around, and you had to backtrack.
Yeah.
You solved the problem. And you did it without me. You solved the problem on your own, but you followed through.
Yeah.
And we've since begun referring to that as freedom and responsibility. You had the freedom to solve those problems as you wanted. You bump into a river, you figure out how to get across it. But I gave you total freedom to solve the problem as you felt appropriate, but I gave you full responsibility for getting there.
Yeah.
And when you have 7 people, all of them do that. You hire for that. You cherry pick people for that. And you can have that culture too when you have 70 people, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And almost every company I know loses that when you get to 700.
How do we keep this, Mark? What do we do to keep this?
Well, what happened was when we laid off 40% of the company, all of a sudden we were back to that. And it made us realize, oh my gosh, we lost this, and we vowed never to lose it again. And what happens when you go from 7 to 70 or 70 to 700 is that you have someone who's not as good as you are, okay? And they show up late to the mountain.
Yeah.
Or they show up to the mountain and they open the bag, they've only got half the stuff you asked them to get. And you go, oh crap, I don't want that to happen again. And you go, here's what we're gonna do. Why don't you check in with, give me a status report at the end of the first week and the end of the second week. And now you're writing a freaking status report.
Yeah.
And you go, I made it, but it cost me more than we expected. And I go, oh, I can't let that happen. I want you to begin getting your expenses approved and filling in an expense report. And you go, oh, I got sick and I had to take 2 days. And you go, okay, from now on, if you're going to be not able to keep going, you got to get permission in advance about what your vacation days are. You begin putting in these guardrails to keep people who don't have very good judgment, who are not responsible. You put guide rails so that you know about it. But what happens is when you take someone like yourself, I'm giving you a lot of credit here, when you take someone who is responsible, who loves that freedom with the accompanying responsibility, and you begin putting in guide rails, they're going, what bullshit is this?
Yeah.
You're giving me responsibility for this $10 million nut, but you don't trust me to make a decision about what level rental car I can do? And you drive people away. And what we've realized at Netflix was that if you engineer your company for the people who have great judgment and give them the freedom and responsibility, they love it. But if you engineer your company for people who don't have great judgment, you protect yourself from people who don't have great judgment, well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You end up with lots and lots of people that have no very good judgment.
Anything else we can look for? Because what you're describing is hiring the people who can execute a mission for you. That's the best people, right? That's what you want. What do we look for? How do we? Any other advice you have?
First of all, you can certainly look for judgment rather than looking for you want to. What did someone accomplish? Not what was their title, not their experience. What did they accomplish? Do they have a track record of success in adverse situations? But listen, the tough part is you can't tell. It's really hard to tell. I mean, you can't paralyze your hiring process. And so you've got to bring people in, and if they don't have good judgment, you have to say goodbye. Yeah. But not in a mean way. You don't put them on a performance improvement plan, which is, what's it called, PIP, or whatever, which is the most cruel and unhuman punishment I can imagine. Because I know I'm going to fire you, and you know I'm going to fire you, but we're going to go through this 6-month exercise of kabuki theater so I can feel good about it. And instead, we're sending the signal to everyone else in the company, what's with Mark? Either A, he's stupid and he can't tell what a loser you are, or he's weak. Yeah. Then he can tell him what to do something about it. Anyway, I'm sidetracking on that. But don't build your company for that. Recognize this is the wrong person. I'm sorry, you're the wrong person. You're great, just not for this role. Let me help you find a job someplace where you're going to crush it. Yeah. And you can unwind it. I mean, Netflix is famous for this freedom and responsibility culture. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with that stuff, but you know what Netflix's vacation policy is?
Probably unlimited?
There is one. There isn't one. Yeah. There's no policy. Yeah. You know what their expense policy is? There isn't one. You know what their travel policy is? There isn't one. There's no policies. All the policies are the same 4 words. Use your best judgment.
Got it.
That's it. Period. And it's not like in day one you can roll that out and there's chaos. But once we realized after the layoff, this is what we want, we began going, crap, where else have we put in place processes and procedures designed to protect us from poor judgment instead of making it a great place to work if you have great judgment. And so little by little, and the lawyers, of course, go nuts. You can't not have vacation policy. Let's see what happens. Works.
So
you can't have full salary transparency. Well, let's try it. It works.
laid off 40% of the workforce.
Sorry, thank you.
Laid off 40% of the workforce and ended up with kind of a stronger team. Ended up with a team that could get more things done.
Absolutely.
What happened next?
So then, of course, that was the gate. That was the turning point. I mean, we then all of a sudden began picking up again. We then were able to raise money, and the big thing was we finally were able to get back on track with an IPO.
Right.
That we had been on a false track for an IPO. We had been back in the fall of 1999, 6 months before the dot-com collapse, going, okay, we're going to go public. And we had gotten some, I'm vacillating between bad advice or what I call it topical at the time advice. In either event, the advice was you should be a portal, which was you should aggregate traffic, because that was at the time the model for these successful internet companies. And we wrote up an IPO prospectus to be a portal for entertainment. And we had an underwriter to be a portal for entertainment. And we went down the whole path until April 15th or 16th, whenever it was, when the dot-com market really collapsed, when they pulled that IPO. And that was the luckiest thing that ever happened to us, because if we had gone public on the expectations we'd be a portal, I wouldn't be here. Or I'd be talking about customized shampoo or something like that. But instead, because of the collapse, because in fall of 2000, we were forced to build a model that actually was economically sustaining, where we actually made money. And then, once we cut our expense load with the layoffs, it got us to the point where we were able to take another shot at it. And in 2002, I think it was May 23rd, if my dates are correct. So 6 years after we launched the company, I found myself in New York City on IPO day. Yep. And this is not, if you're picturing in your mind, you know, up on the balcony with the big bell and, you know, all the ticker tape falling, that's not us, because that's the New York Stock Exchange. Yeah. And we went public on NASDAQ. Got it. And NASDAQ is a computer-driven exchange. Everything happens inside a server room in Weehawken, New Jersey, or something like that. And so our choice was either we can go to Weehawken, New Jersey to a server room, which didn't seem too exciting, or we were going to go to the Merrill Lynch trading floor. And Merrill Lynch was the underwriter, and they were the ones who were going to be issuing the very first trades. They'd be selling the stock out and then waiting to watch it trading. And on that day, it was kind of funny because in some ways it was this weird anticlimax, because there's no ringing of a bell, there's no instant where you are all of a sudden public. On that day, Merrill Lynch is on the phone to all the big customers trying to find the opening price. And they want to find a price at which, what's the maximum price where they can sell out the full underwriting. Yeah. But if it's too low, then you left money on the table. If it's too high, you don't sell the whole thing. And even worse, you want to, they, not me, they want to price it a little bit low, so when it does start trading, it immediately trades up. You get the bounce. Because then everyone goes, oh, it shows momentum for the company, and all the customers that Merrill sold it to instantaneously make money for nothing. A little bitterness there. It's okay, it's the way the process works. And so I was there in New York with Reed Hastings, Barry McCarthy, the CFO, and my 10-year-old son, 8-year-old son? 10-year-old son, Logan. And I was the one doing the play-by-play to the company back in Los Gatos. And for them, it was like 6:30 in the morning, because it was 9:30 in New York. And they've all come in early for breakfast, and we have speakers set up. And I wasn't there, I was in New York. But I'm going, they're all standing around, They're all just talking on the phone. Like, there's nothing happening. And then even then when they go, okay, we've got a price, and it goes out, still nothing's happening, because now all these companies have stock, but until one of them sells it on the stock exchange, nothing happens. So then you turn your head up and you're watching the ticker and you're waiting to see the first NFLX ticker across. And when that finally does, it's like, yeah, everyone cheers, break open the champagne.
What was the revenue when you went public, and like what was the initial market cap? What was the valuation of Netflix then?
The revenue, I think, we raised $70 million. The revenue, gosh, has to be, I don't remember, 30?
30 million.
Yeah, and the market cap was 300.
Got it.
So it was a different time.
Got it.
Maybe the revenue was higher. That's a good question. I don't remember what the revenue was. But I do remember the market cap was like $300 million, because I was struck, because we, the most recent startup that I've been involved with, another Santa Cruz company called Looker, we just sold, entered an agreement to sell that company to Google,
Big exit, yeah.
private, at $2.6 billion. So almost 10 times as big before that had its liquidation event than when Netflix did it back then. Another way that times have changed.
So that's our Netflix story, from idea to IPO. My question for you is, like, what are you working on now, Mark? What are you doing?
So, as I said before, Netflix was number 6 and Looker was probably number 7. But I've kind of always, for a while, I've been very introspective about what is success. 20 years ago. And I kind of was going, it's not having the IPO. That's not what you aim for, because almost never do you ever achieve it. It's extremely unusual. So I decided early on that for me, success was learning what you're good at and learning what you like. And if you're successful, you're doing those two things. And for me, they're the same thing. It's early stage companies. It's startups. For some reason, I love that. I love the problem solving. I love how it's a path which has not been followed before, and you're the first one down it. I love sitting around the table with really smart people solving really tricky and interesting puzzles. And now I'll be a bit immodest, I'm actually really good at it. I have some weird set of skills which just luckily lend themselves to that. I'm good at triage. I have an intuitive sense of what, of all the 100 things that are on fire, are the 2 or 3 that if I get those right, it'll make the rest go away. And then I have this other ability to put blinders on, and even though everything else is screaming, to focus on solving those 2 or 3 problems. But with Netflix, it was ironic that as it became externally successful, had an IPO, it had all the cash it needed, we could hire these amazing people. For me, it was changing, because the types of problems I was solving weren't the ones that I was good at, nor did I like. And so I had this really weird tension between, I loved this company. It was like a child, that I wanted to see it thrive and I wanted to fight its fights, but I didn't like what I was doing every day. So ultimately decided it was time to move on. And so that's a long intro to what I'm doing now, is I thought long and hard about how do I get that fix. I didn't want to start another company. I was 45 years old. But I needed that fix. And so the way I get my fix now is I mentor other early stage founders. It's not advising, it's a lot deeper than that, because I really need to get deep enough into the company to know the founder, to know their personality and how they tick and their family, know the co-founder, need to know who the VCs are, need to know the product, the category, the technology, the competition. Because then I can actually get what I want, which is to sit at that table and not just be giving pattern recognition bullshit, but really to understand the problem well enough that I could sit at the table and solve really interesting problems with really smart people.
A lot of them are going to watch it.
And even better, I get to go home at 5 o'clock. So it's like the win-win. So I've been doing that. I mean, and it's fantastic. And I pick who I want to mentor based on the people. I'm looking for the person I want to work with, and I'm looking for the person who I enjoy and makes me laugh and challenges me, and that if the phone rings at 11 o'clock at night, I don't wince. I go, oh, what's up? Yeah. Which means I can't work for very many of them. I can only do 4 or 5 at a time. But it also means I don't care about the tech. So it ends up dragging me into really cool stuff. Like one of them is doing AI, which I read about, but now to see the real way they're solving problems. Another one's doing robotics. So really, really interesting stuff. It's the perfect way to scratch my itch, not have it be full time, so I can go out and it's like feed the rat, as I call it. You know, do all my biking and surfing and outdoor stuff, and yet still have time to hang out with my family. So it's kind of it's a luckiest guy in the world.
How do they get in touch with you? Let's say a lot of people are going to watch this video. I'm sure all of them would love to work with you. All of them, right? Like, right. How do they get in touch with you? What's a good way for even founders to reach out to you? What do they say? Like, how do they do this?
I've become pretty visible now, and I'm on Twitter at MB Randolph, and I'm on Instagram at, I think it said That Will Never Work. But probably the best way is I have a website, which is marcrandolph.com, Marc with a C, and on there is a contact form, and I read every single one, and I answer almost every single one. And they may not be long answers, but if I see something that interests me, or I sense this is the kind of person who might be fun to work with, I'll follow up and continue.
What do you recommend they mention to you? What should they say? Like, do they tell you about their project or kind of the company size?
Yeah, what I want to understand is what's the problem they're trying to solve. Because the problem is what's interesting, not the idea. The idea is gone in a day. The problem endures. And what have they tried? What's the evidence they have? I'm looking to see, you know, these days if you're interviewing the big interview question for an engineer is not where'd you go to school, what'd you study, not even what your job was, it's what do you build on the side?
Yeah.
Because they're looking for that. And that's what I'm curious. What have you tried? What's the process you've used to try and solve your problem? Because that is what the interesting part of being an entrepreneur is. And that's the part that I want to see how they think.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Marc Randolph, make sure to buy his book. It's called That Will Never Work. I read it myself on Audible. I loved it. It has a lot more than we discussed. We didn't have as much time to discuss. So get the book, That Will Never Work. Reach out to Marc Randolph if you have an interesting startup. And I'm so grateful you came on the show, Marc.
This is really fun. Many thanks for your time.
I hope this video was helpful. My YouTube channel is all about entrepreneurship. It's all about startups. If you enjoy videos about entrepreneurship and startups, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.